I'm going to put this on, and here we go. So here's our topic: live coaching, overcoming winter burnout. I love this topic. Very excited to get to walk you through what I've prepared together or for our time together. Here's my objectives, or what I'm hoping to cover today. I want to share a little bit about clarifying the specific struggles that we as leaders face. I think it helps sometimes to clarify the challenges and to recognize the struggles that we share in. I'm hoping that you'll be inspired by the very best example that ever lived, which is Christ. I hope that you will get a sense of some specific ways or reminders of ways of how to manage stress and your energy and some of the dangers that come at us as leaders that we can sometimes be even more acutely aware of at this season of the year. I'm hoping to introduce some ideas related to self-discipline and some skills that can help you recover during specific seasons of recovery so you can move forward with strength. I want to answer your specific questions, and I want to make sure that you know about time with us, how you can get time with us to learn even more about this. I always like to start with the end in mind. Here are a couple of next steps that you could take. Some of you joining today are actually clients already working with us in coaching, but we are building our waiting pool for launching new coaching projects in 2020. We tend to start new projects every 60 days or so, sometimes less, depending on the size of the waiting pool. If you have any interest in that, you can learn more about it at our website. You've probably been getting some invites from me or texts from me about the upcoming Donor Development Bootcamp. I know things like this are always tough to schedule. Some of the folks who join small groups have been to boot camps already, but apart from our coaching, it is the absolute most impactful thing that I get to be a part of. So I would really encourage you to move things around, make it a priority if you at all have an inkling that you would be able to come or benefit. That's donorbootcamp.com. This is is hosted by an organization called Renew a Nation, but they create the space and invite people. We're able to invite folks that follow us, and then I really provide the teaching there. So it's a really special experience for me, and I hope for all that have attended. You can email me at my email there, z@developmentandleadership.org. You can call us direct at 314-403-0778. And if you want to text me, you can text me there on my mobile. That does go directly to me. I also send out texts pretty consistently, just words of encouragement, challenges, calls to action, that sort of thing. So if you're not getting those from me, be sure and text me at that number. The system will respond, make sure that we've got your updated number, and then you'll get that. And yes, it really is me that writes that, sends that out, responds, all that. So here's the question on our topic, winter burnout. How do you know when you're burned out? People love to use the phrase burned out. I'm burned out. I'm so burned out. So-and-so's burned out. I can tell this person's really burned out. How do you know when you're burned out? There actually is a set of questions developed by the Mayo Clinic. Have you become cynical or critical at work? Do you drag yourself to work? Do you have trouble getting started once you arrive? Have you become irritable or impatient with coworkers, customers, or clients? Do you lack the energy to be consistently productive? Do you lack satisfaction from your achievements? Do you feel disillusioned? Are you using food, drugs, or alcohol to feel better or to simply feel less? Have your sleep habits or your appetite changed? Are you troubled by unexplained headaches, backaches, and physical complaints? So all of those at one point and the other, we've probably all faced. But I find this list helpful because there are particular things that I pick up on that I know are a sign for me in terms of burnout, cynical or critical. I can catch myself thinking, normally being a positive person, increasingly cynical, irritable or impatient, getting trouble getting started. I tend to be a fast mover. So when I'm feeling like there's this energy issue, moving slow, experiencing burnout. So what do you do about that? How do we deal with these things? The first thing I think is helpful is to know that burnout, or whatever words you use is a part of the actual leadership struggle. There's not something wrong with you. It's not something that you just push through or push aside. It's actually a struggle that is a regular part of the leadership journey. And there are specific skills and habits and choices that we can make that actually can help us heal and recover from that during those seasons. And so it's not something that you're just victimized, like I'm dealing with burnout and I can't do anything about it. It is a part of the leadership struggle. The leadership struggle, as I define it, has some specific characteristics. To be a leader in today's world often means that we're going to struggle with a performance-based mentality, whether we have it or other people are putting it on us. When you are a leader and have responsibilities, it is easy to constantly be evaluated and evaluating yourself on your performance. And so you find your value in how much money is raised, or your value in the numbers of people served, or the value in terms of the way you use your time. And even though none of those things are in themselves inherently bad, finding our value, finding our worth, how we feel about ourselves constantly and how we perform ultimately does lead to burnout, because we are only human and therefore we're limited. So we are not always going to be performing at our best. Another aspect of this leadership struggle is serving versus selfish. I think to be an excellent leader, you want to be in a serving mentality. Most leaders that I know are servant-minded, have a servant's heart. It's very easy for that to tip into, though, a reality where you feel like you're being selfish to focus on recovery, to focus on rest, to focus on recharging, to take time to think, to take time to pray. Personally, I don't know about you, but it was a huge issue for me for many, many years. It felt selfish to exercise, to worry about eating well, to take time away just for me. I always felt like that was a selfishness issue, and that meant I was not serving well. And then another, of course, challenge, particularly in today's culture, is more. When you're a leader, more is always expected for less. Always expected for less. Thank you so much for the amazing job you did. Now let's do it again. Let's do it even better. So these are the aspects of the struggle that we're faced with, and living in that constantly without an awareness of how to grow through that, recover through that at times, can really lead to that feeling, that experience of burnout. I like to look at scriptures at some examples. I think Jesus was the ultimate coach. I love this painting that just brings that to memory again. And oftentimes, I think we place so much emphasis on Jesus and who he was as the God-man that we also forget to look more closely at what it meant for him to be fully God and fully man. And being fully man, we know that he did feel pressures on his time, on his energy, on his strength. Evidence of this, one of the evidence is in Luke 12:50, but I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it's accomplished. The word there for distressed in the Greek is syneko, which means pressed. It's this pressed on every side. It's compressed. If you look at this, it's the word they would use when they put an ox and a cattle in between fencing to get it under control. If you've ever seen even a video nowadays of what that looks like. He's pressed on all sides. He's under tremendous pressure on all sides. What's the baptism he's talking about? He's immersed. He's overwhelmed. There's this covering over completely of him that he is going to be facing. And how distressed, how syneko I am, how much pressure I am under until this is accomplished. So what were some of the behaviors that we see, though? If he's pressured all the time, what's he actually doing? Well, but Jesus himself would often slip away into the wilderness and pray. He'd just slip away from the crowd. I worked with a leader for years who was a master at this. He would show up, he'd be fully present and engaged in a meeting, crowd, connecting with people, and then all of a sudden he would just disappear. I'd turn around, he's no longer there. He had put in the time and the energy that he had planned in advance that he was going to commit, and then he would just slip away. Didn't make a big fanfare about it. Didn't feel like he had to stay till the very end of every single thing. Just slip away. Another verse I love is Jesus himself was in the stern. This is when they're in the boat. There are waves crashing. They're in a storm. Where's Jesus? He's in the stern. What's he doing? He's asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said, do you not even care? Do you not care that we're perishing? So I love this example. Everyone else is under this tremendous fear, this storm. It's a very real, scary storm. What's he doing? He is resting in that moment. And they have to call this attention to him. I think that's very interesting. So Jesus, perceiving they were intending to come and take him by force, this huge crowd, they're rallying together. They're all excited. They're going to come take him by force. They're going to make him king, basically put him in a higher level of leadership, all this stuff. What does he do? He withdraws. Withdraws again, not just for the first time, again to the mountain by himself alone. So we see, I think we forget about this sometimes, this constant pressing in on him in every way as he's ultimately moving toward his high calling. And we see these behaviors where he's operating on some sort of different evaluation than what others outside of him are expecting. I find that very insightful. Also, one of the things I had to learn the hard way is this whole idea of stress. I had a doctor once tell me that I was a bit unique in that I don't register stress like some people do. Like you won't hear me to this day say the words, oh, I'm so stressed, or I've been really stressed lately. Whatever that tuning fork is that some people have to sort of be aware of the stresses that they're under, it's not in me. So I discover when I've been under too much pressure for too long by getting sick or getting some of those other things we talk about, cynical, frustrated, burnout, exhausted, all that. And I have discovered I'm not the only person like that as well. What I didn't know is that we tend to think of stress as just bad, that it's good when we're not under stress, and when we're under stress, it's bad. The reality is in life and the way we are in our bodies as humans is there's good stress and bad stress. And so when I learned to distinguish the two, that was very helpful to me. Good stress, knowing how to use stress in a good and healthy way, actually creates energy, creates strength, just like stressing your body when you're exercising, doing that appropriately and consistently creates energy. Overdoing it, doing it incorrectly, tears that away from energy. So there's ways to make stress your actual ally. And one of the people that really redefined my thinking was just hearing about this guy, Wim Hof is his name. They call him the Iceman. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Wim Hof. He's an odd duck for sure. But at a very young age, he demonstrated an ability and continued growing the ability to put himself into extreme cold situations. And so he's accomplished these unbelievable feats physically in cold, freezing environments that would seem to be impossible. And he now teaches people this whole method of breathing and exposing themselves, putting their body under that stress. And they've also found there's all these health benefits as well. So I was like, gosh, putting yourself into what for many people would be a life-threatening environment, in his case, is not life-threatening. What's going on there? So that began this whole journey of good stress, bad stress. What's a normal stress response? What's a powerful, healthy stress response? This is the way I think about it. I could be wrong. You might have a better way of thinking about it. But I do think that this aligns with what we know in brain research these days. And I think it aligns with what we see as leaders in our own life. And I think it aligns with scripture. This is the normal stress response in the world. Okay, this is normal. Normal would be you're planning, you're thinking ahead, you're anticipating, you're imagining. And another word for that is anxiety. We're trying to predict an unknown future. We're imagining the worst is going to happen. That's anxiety. That leads to our will being enslaved by our emotions. So our we're deciding what to do or not do based on how we feel. And that leads to an action. Our emotions are dragging us along either in the wrong actions or inaction, meaning we're just not doing anything because we're so overwhelmed. We're so exhausted. That then leads to a lack of awareness. You lose perspective on the seasons of life, the seasons of daylight till dark, the seasons of the way your energy ebbs and flows. My wife calls that peter out. She'll say to me, "Oh, I can tell, we're coming up on Zach Peters out season." And so what happens is when I'm being led around by emotions, because I'm starting with this whole feeling of anxiety, living with this feeling of anxiety, then that's causing me to completely lose perspective, which leads to all this go, 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 or I'm not doing anything. So I'm getting more overwhelmed. And so I start petering out. And then that is this vicious cycle of shrinking or shirking. You start shrinking back from the things that you should do, or shirking the duties that are the most important things, the best things to move forward on. All of that results in low energy. You're just exhausted to do it. And this is a cycle that goes round and round and round. You could do this over the course of a year. You could do this over a course of a few weeks. You could do this even over the course of a day. The bad news is that's normal. If you learn this, or have your own way of organizing this into a flow, you'll spot this all around you, and you'll spot this in your own life. So the question is then, what is the good stress response? How do I take these stresses and make stress an ally? So this is, I think, not only more healthy, I think is much more in line with ultimately how God created us before the fall of sin. Sin's jumbled these things up. So we start with emotions that follow the will. So we take action knowing it's the right thing to do, the best thing to do. We take action, and then emotions come along with that action. That leads to stretching yourself. To take action where the emotions might be trailing, it stretches you. Stretching yourself, just like working out, just like pushing yourself into something that's uncomfortable, creates energy, lowers the anxiety threshold the next time. Then that leads to a greater awareness of seasons, which gives you another way to say it is greater endurance, greater energy. And knowing how to take these actions leads to greater energy, which leads to a greater sense of endurance and strength. And then we plan. And as those the anxiety that comes with planning, the anxiety that comes with forecasting, then we circle this back around. So this becomes the healthy flow. So you may have questions about this. I could talk about this for a long time because I've spent a long time thinking about it in my own life, but I have a lot more I want to share with you. But knowing the difference between normal and healthy, very, very helpful. So when you're facing this sort of peter out season, burnout, whatever you call it, however the normal stress cycle is showing up in your life, one of the very first things that I think helps is having a recovery plan. How do you actually, a lot of people go, well, I'm burnout. Okay, well, what are you going to do? What do you do when you face those seasons? What do you do when you're coming out of a season where you've really been pushed back, right? So this guy knows how to recover. I have a recovery plan written out, and I'm always nervous about sharing this with people. You can create it your own way, but this is a simple way to do it, and I've put this together. So what are things that help me feel a little bit better? I may not have time this season to go away for a week on vacation, right? So what are things that are going to help you feel a little bit better? So some of mine are there: listening to music, doing jumping jacks, calling a friend, having a cup of tea or coffee, reading, intense exercise, playing with kids. Those are things that help me feel a little bit better. What are things that fill me emotionally, fill me up with energy? Time with mentors and leaders, times with my wife, learning something new, journaling, exercise. What are things that drain me? If I'm trying to recover, I need to focus more on the fills and minimize the drains. Mediocre people. You might find that funny, but man, some way that somebody is mediocre with their work, their time, their life just wears me out. Uh, Hopefully you don't know any mediocre people. Yard work, uh, boy, that drains me. I can do it, would just drains me. Buying clothing, I'm not sure why that is, but buying clothing wears me out. Social networking, going to the haircut, get a haircut, going to get a doctor, just drains me. Weekly actions. Okay, what are specific things I can do every week that keep me constantly recovering? A specific number of hours of sleep I've determined is key. An hour for exercise, limiting email and media, scheduled time for fun, not doing fun things by accident, but scheduling it. A day, a month that's devoted to nothing but thinking, reading and thinking and planning, where there's nothing else on the agenda for an entire day. I do that once a month. And then another weekly action is 50 minutes an hour. My tendency is to go hour after hour after hour after hour all day of work. And so I learned this back practicing music, that I was able to be far more energetic over far longer spans of time if I treated 50 minutes as an hour of work. 50 minutes of practice was an hour of practice. 50 minutes of phone calls is an hour of phone calls. 50-minute meeting is an hour meeting. Gives me 10 minutes to refocus, pray, even close my eyes for a moment, and I have that cycle of recovery. Be taking notes as we go, because you may have some questions on this, and I will be sharing these slides with you as well. Now remember so if you look at this, understanding healthy stress response, unhealthy stress response, having a recovery plan so that we're not just going, oh, I'm so stressed, I'm so burnt out. How do we actually recover in those seasons? How do we maintain cycles of recovery? And then we also have to watch out for dangers. I love this sign, do not touch. Not only will this kill you, it will hurt you the whole time you're dying. There are specific dangers in your life as a leader, and here are a few things that I keep in front of me. One of the dangers is sacrificing yourself on the altar of the ministry. Convincing yourself that God is calling you day in, day out, year after year, to sacrifice everything in your life, your health, your energy, your family relationships, for this ministry. And I used to think that was what we were called to do. And what I've learned is that that is complete vanity. Christ himself, as he was living out his ministry, did not demonstrate that behavior at all. Where he demonstrates sacrifice ultimately was on the work that only he could do, which was on the cross. And that work is done. We do not have to do that work. And so there's a culture, and you may be like me. Just hearing me say those words is offensive, and that's okay. I remember the first time someone challenged me on this idea, I said, well, either you're wrong or I'm wrong, but one of us is wrong. And it took a lot of study to really get this settled. Another danger zone is changing your emotional state through unhealthy means. This could step on a lot of people's toes, but I have seen this in my own life. For some people, that could be drinking. For some people, that could be food. For some people, it could be sugar. Sugar is a big one for me. Ice cream. For some people, it could be pornography. For some people, it could be certain relationships with people. That all of these things subtly, or maybe even if no one is seeing them, they're changing your emotional state in an unhealthy way. And that's part of how you are coping. And that's a danger zone, right? That leads nowhere good. Isolating yourself from the value of your spouse's input or your inner circle. If you're not married, your inner circle, that's a danger zone when I'm not getting that input along the way. Another one is seeking things that make you feel too much better rather than a little bit. I know that sounds kind of odd, but I learned this from a very wise lady who impacted my life. She said, look for things that are going to make you feel a little bit better in these days, or a little bit better in these seasons. Because if it's something that makes you feel a lot better, it's probably dangerous. This person makes me feel so great, right? This meal or this thing that I eat every week, this makes me feel so great, right? Anything that's so much better rather than little, is a danger zone. And you probably know all of this, but I have to keep it in front of me. And then forgetting to halt. This is a method. Okay, well, we've got these danger zones. What do we do? HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So oftentimes when we're dealing with burnout or in different seasons, we're being called upon to make decisions or react to certain things going on. And if we're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, then we need to halt. Just need to halt and not move forward on that decision. That's been a helpful one as well, because my tendency, because I'm not registering all that stress, is just push through it and keep pushing. There are some specific skills and disciplines that I want to share with you that I have found to be helpful. I have tons of these. They almost feel like tricks, some of them do to me, but they're helpful. One, some of you have already heard me talk a lot about is better scorecarding. You know, knowing how to track the score of your work. Because as a leader, day in, day out, we are often so busy, we get at the end of the day, we have no sense of what we actually accomplish. So from a development perspective, for instance, we teach the weekly scorecard, where you're looking at the time you're blocking for face-to-face meetings in the next 6 weeks, how many you have scheduled, how many you had this past week, how many are on your follow-up list. That's not to get you to perform to meet a certain score. It's for you to be aware of the score, aware of what you're accomplishing, and aware of the future of the forward progress. That's a key way. And these types of systems create energy, because at the end of the day or the end of the week, you're not saying, gosh, now what did we do again? Did I get anything done? Did anything move us forward? Scoring helps that. It taps in enough to that performance-based mentality that many of us feel, but you get to create the scorecard. You get to decide intentionally what numbers really matter. Another method is learning to say no. That's hard for me. I hear from a lot of leaders it's hard as well. Learning to say no with style. Some people just say you should just say no, and I'm working on that. Henry Cloud talks a lot about that. It's okay to say no with no explanation, no nothing. But there's a book you may have read, Essentialism, that he has some, it's great. The book is good, but some of his examples are worth reading the whole book. And he has this example from E.B. White. I think this may be in that book, but I caught it on his blog. E.B. White was asked to join this committee. His response in a letter was, "Dear Mr. Adams, thanks for your letter inviting me to join the Committee of Arts and Sciences for Eisenhower. I must decline for secret reasons. Sincerely, E.B. White." That is saying no with style. Now, I don't say no that way, but I do have multiple templates of how I say no to requests. And I don't get any bad requests. They're all good. I would like to say yes to every one of them. But like every one of you, I'm only one person and I'm limited. And I want to say yes to the very best things. And I want to do it intentionally. And so learning to say no is key. Better systems. So I could do a whole series of live coachings just on systems. But one of the ones that I think is most impactful for most is having a model week. Budgeting your time. Just like you've heard me talk about, that a budget for your money is Dave Ramsey says, tells your money where to go before you have the money. A model week is the same thing. You're budgeting your time, telling your time where to go before it rolls along. So this is an example that I provide. This is no longer my updated model week, but it was back in 2012. So blocking out where I'm going to put time with no expectation it's always going to look exactly like that, but I'm always scheduling to that as much as possible. Another skill or discipline is get moving early. You know, this is not about getting fit in a new year or new year's resolutions. Energy will follow you and you will sleep better, you will recover better if you can get up and get moving early. Every piece of evidence out there supports this. I love this. I didn't make it to the gym today. That makes 5 years in a row. I once lived like that. A good way to introduce the discipline of getting moving early. You don't have to get up at an ungodly hour, but get up and get moving early is what I call 10 then 20. So take 10 minutes, get up, 10 minutes and move. Walk around your house, get on the treadmill, walk outside, jog in place, jumping jacks, whatever. Move for 10 minutes. Don't get the coffee and sit down. Don't jump right into scripture in your quiet time. 10 minutes of movement, and then go right into 20 minutes of exercise. What will happen is when you do those 10 minutes of movement, you can't help yourself. You have to push yourself a little bit harder, and that creates that healthy energy cycle. And then begin your day. Now, again, that's not prescriptive. Everybody's going to have their own way of doing it. But if you struggle with movement, if you struggle with creating energy through exercise, that's a good way to do it. That coming from a person who never exercised a day in their life, this is me, until I was in my late 30s, actually. Found out the hard way how important that is. Another skill is working at resting. I tell people this all the time. I have to work at resting. Whatever that desire is to just rest, take a break, it's just not in me naturally. And I really envy that in other people, being much more tuned in to their energy levels. So I have to schedule it like anything else. I have to have a plan for it. I have to work at it. And so that could be helpful to you if you're a little bit like me. Self-evaluate with key questions. This is another discipline. So you might have your own list, but I have a list I want to share with you. These are some self-evaluation questions that I use that help me regain perspective on pressures and stress and challenges that I'm facing. And so I'm not going to read all these to you, but am I seeing reality clearly at this moment, right? You lose that ability to do that when you're in a normal, unhealthy stress response. Am I accepting God's grace for me or striving against it? God's grace for me is that I can rest. I can stop. I can end this day. I can focus on something that's healthy for me to regain the energy and strength for what's coming next. He gives that grace to me. Am I trusting in his goodness and gentleness in the future? Or am I always moving because I'm fearful that his provisions are going to fail? Am I assuming God's best for us? Is the pressure I feel, the burnout I feel, the overwhelm I feel due to work that's undone, a lack of action, a lack of follow through, or even a lack of integrity? A lot of times that is where burnout is coming from, is you're just not doing the things deep down you know to do. Am I staying diligent in prayer? So I have my own list. You may develop your own list, but I'm sharing this with you. These are questions that I'll regularly review, sometimes every morning, in different seasons. I have far, far more than this, but these are some of the essential ones. Number 7, learning to consider the trade-offs. If I say yes to this, then that means I need to say no to this. You are not living intentionally. You are not living out the real challenge of leadership if you are not considering the trade-offs. And I'm ashamed to say it took me way too many years to do that. I thought everyone else kind of needed to make the trade-offs. An example of that, being in a team meeting and 3-hour team meeting, and I'm wondering why people are, needing a snack and needing a break and things like that. And I'm like, what is wrong with all these people? I wasn't considering the trade-offs. Pushing people that hard, that long, for productivity in that moment has a trade-off somewhere else. And I had to learn that the hard way. 8, better decision-making. I think I got this idea from Greg McCowan as well years ago. I read that book. I mentioned essentialism the first time, and I didn't like it. It just didn't seem practical to me. It didn't seem insightful. Then I heard him interviewed, and I said, I'm going to have to go back and read that book because some of what he's saying there is really profound. So the second time I read it, I picked up on this. Again, it's hard for us to say no. So, because there are good things that come at us all the time. So he recommends creating a structured way of considering certain opportunities or certain decisions. And what you do is you create a criteria where you say, okay, what's the minimum criteria that this opportunity has to meet for me to even consider it? because it's an easy no if it doesn't meet these some of these criteria. And then, okay, now that I'm considering it, what are some of the extreme criteria that I think have to be met? So one of the ones that comes up for us is we'll have certain organizations that will say, we'd like for you to work with us, or here's a project we'd like for you to join with us on. And this took some thinking, but this has really radically impacted me. So I just established, okay, here are these minimum criteria. It has to pass 3 of those. If it passes 2, if it only hits 2, then it's an easy no. Doesn't hit any, it's an easy no. If it's 3, okay, now I really need to pray about this, consider this carefully. So I won't go into all the detail here. I must confess, when I first came across this idea, again, the first time I read his book, I was like, that is really overdoing it. I don't naturally think that way. But what I realized is that otherwise I'm relying upon my intuition and my emotions at any given moment on whether or not I say yes or no to the opportunity. There are a lot of different ways to do this. One I heard about recently was it's easy to say yes to something that's 6 months out or a year away. It sounds great, and yeah, I'm going to be able to do that, and it's plenty of time to plan. So one leader said, consider that if that was going to happen tomorrow or this week, would you say yes to it or no to it, and why or why not? That's another framework, right? So the whole idea here is getting out of your head and heart and down on paper a little bit more structure. Some people really push back on this, me included, because they say, it's too scientific, it's too structured, I got to have the freedom and the flexibility. When I realized that, I get to decide whatever I want to decide. It is my life. It is my use of time. I can say no, I can say yes. So having a structure does not throw out my ability to change this or say, I'm not going to worry about this. I really want to do that. It's a terrible use of time. I'm going to do it anyway. I have the freedom to do that, right? This is actually to help me think through my thinking, which is in itself a self-leadership skill. So moving forward, I want to point out 2 scriptures, and I want to give you a list of the examples that I've shown you that you can get from the slides, or if you'd like to email me and send you a PDF or something, we can do that too. But everyone that's registered will get the slides and the recording from this live coaching. 2 verses that keep me grounded on this whole conversation. And then I want to look at your questions. First one, this is Jesus talking to the church, one of the churches in Revelation, 3rd chapter. Wake up and strengthen the things that remain, which were about to die. For I have not found your deeds completed in the sight of my God. I love this verse, and I love looking at the context because he is issuing a very significant challenge. Wake up, you're falling asleep. Strengthen these things that are still remaining, that you're holding on to. Strengthen what you can. These things were about to die. I have not found your deeds completed in the sight of my God. If you are still here and on this live coaching, if you are walking the planet today, then your deeds are not completed in the sight of our God. Neither are mine, apparently, today. So we do have a role to play to not just push through the burnout, but to wake up and say, okay, how am I going to strengthen these things? How am I going to recalibrate these things and renew these things? What is my recovery plan? How am I going to plan and take action? How am I going to have this healthier response to stress? And then I love the assurance that I find in Psalm 18. You have also given me the shield of your salvation. I have this shield that's protecting me. It's giving me real life. That's your salvation. Your right hand's upholding me, so I'm not falling. And then your gentleness makes me great. It's not just the pressure. It's not you challenging me to perform at a certain level. It's your gentleness, your grace toward me that's making me great as I try to strengthen these things. So those are 2 scriptures that I often come back to on this topic. Resources I mentioned that I showed you, a worksheet for what energizes and drains you, sort of a recovery plan, an example decision-making framework that you might apply to your own big challenges that come your way, developing your own, a model week, 6x6 I did not talk about, but goes along with the model week. You're probably familiar with that concept with me. And then example self-evaluation questions. All those you can go back and find in the slides. If you need to email us to email a standalone PDF of each of those, we'd be glad to do that as well. So let's get to your questions. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And if I can, here we go. And dive into questions. So we've got two options. You can put questions in the Q&A box. You can put questions in the chat, and I can call on people. And one of the things that I love about these small groups is that we can really dive into some of the questions that come along the way. So Michael said he's having to step away soon. So I'm here till 10 minutes till the hour, 5 minutes till the hour. So I'm very interested in your questions. So let me pick someone. Jeremy, I'm going to call on Jeremy, see if he has a question about this. So let's see, I'm going to try right now to allow you to talk. Jeremy, can you hear me? Jeremy, let me unmute you. Sorry about that. Hold on one second. By the way, while I'm trying this, if you have questions, type them in the chat box. Jeremy, for some reason, I can't get you unmuted. Let's see. Hold on one second. Don't be shy, folks. Type in questions. I've covered a lot. So there's somebody. Good. Thank you. Hello. All right. Hold on a second. One more time. Jeremy, see if you have a mute button that you can unmute. You may not be where you can, but there we go.
Oh, hey, Zach.
Hey, I got it now.
I wasn't trying to say anything. I don't know why my computer's doing that, but
no, it's my fault.
It's good to see you, brother, and I appreciate
thank you
this morning. I needed a lot of those encouragements today.
Well, that means a lot coming from you, brother. Jeremy's a retired Air Force JAG and knows a little something about doing hard things. So I'm thankful that you would find anything of value here, brother. Thank you.
So I do. So I've kind of taken the, kind of on the development front, and I've taken the month of January has sort of slipped by without doing much. I mean, what advice would you give to leaders doing development work in this, after the end of your season and kind of getting going with that again? I've taken a bit of a break, in part based on some of the good guidance you just gave, but I feel like maybe I've given myself too much of a break.
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah. There's a lot there that we normally would challenge people to be working on in this point in the year. But Jeremy, keeping it broad, and again, but folks, we're all on the this is a development topic question, not so much what I was talking about here. But in the concept of seasons and development work, a simple way to think about the whole calendar year, Jeremy, is that January through March, generally speaking, is a thanking, reporting season.
Right.
April through May, let's say, asking, follow-up May, June, July. And so keeping it that simple helps you kind of know what you need to do this time of year. So first off, we need to have an updated plan of our whole calendar year, because even though in your case you're a school, you operate on a fiscal year that's close to your school year, we have to be thinking about, we just finished a tax giving year. Where do we want to be leading people through the whole calendar year? So looking clearly at all of the people who gave in 2019, that's your donors to retain in 2020. Donors to regain, which gave 2018 or prior, but not in 2019, and getting those lists up to date for the year, because they won't change through the whole 2020. Those two lists won't. So planning, taking some time by no later than, say, second week of February, and having your message updated, your prospect plan updated, and a calendar updated for the whole year.
Right.
And then looking and saying, okay, how have we done in terms of thanking? If we've said thank you to folks that gave and called and all that, then we start looking at who do we need to report to. If they just gave and normally don't give early in the calendar year in the first
Right.
6 months, it's
Right.
not as important that we report to them right now. But there are people who gave last year in the first 6 months, and there are people obviously on the regain list that
Right.
then reporting to them, sending them something, following up, all of that. So I would not at all feel like you're behind. Most people really drag into the year. Giving drops off significantly, typically in January. It's usually the lowest month of the whole year in terms of giving. So January, early February is a great time to plan, update those lists, update your calendar, and really look at how do we know that people are clearly processing a report from us in terms of how
Yeah.
their past dollars were given.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes. Thank you, Zach.
And recover, because you've got a
Yes.
giving year ahead. So that's another part of it.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Thanks, brother.
hope that's helpful. Thank you, brother. All right, we've got some other questions here. Good questions. Okay, next question from Bill Evans says, I'm not sure that I understand term seasons in your slide about enemies and allies. Okay, what I mean about seasons is that there are seasons in life, not just fall, winter, spring, summer. Seasons in life, depending upon your age, your health, your family, the age of your children, seasons of difficulty in the organization. You may have gone through a tragedy in your organization that you're working through. You may be under a significant legal attack or financial difficulties. So one of the things that I think that gets lost a little bit in today's leadership culture is that without meaning to, so-called experts like me can make all this stuff sound like a prescription, where if you do these things, all the stuff's going to work out. The reality is you could be doing everything right and be going through a season of tremendous pressure, tremendous anxiety and fear, tremendous difficulty, completely out of your control. And so if you're not aware of those seasons, we're in a season right now where we have to be incredibly intense and focused. We're in a season right now, like what I was saying to Jeremy, you might want to do a little bit of recovery, right, for the next push. So what happens when we get that healthy, an unhealthy stress response going, we lose perspective on the seasons. We don't realize this is not a season of high anxiety. This is not a season of tremendous pressure. We're creating a lot of this. And then there are other times where I'll talk to a leader and they're at a critical time. I mean, it is absolutely critical that they do everything humanly in their power with the intensity and consistency, or they will fail and there will be massive consequences. And they're still going home at 4:00 because they think that that's what you do consistently your whole life if you're going to be healthy. And so that's what I mean by seasons, is when your emotions are driving your actions, you can lose perspective on that. So you have to step back through that cycle. So hopefully that's helpful. Rusty asked this question. No one's ever asked this question of me. You indicated it took some time to learn, realize these concepts. How do you get either those that lead or who you work for to recognize and understand these principles? I think that you do this by being transparent about questions that you're grappling with and asking for their input and advice. A lot of times leaders above you or around you are a lot more aware of these difficulties than you surmise. You're just not in a place that they're being talked about. People are complaining, but they're not talking about, okay, but what do you do? And so it's helpful to clarify the questions. I'm really struggling with my children at this age right now. How do I do all this stuff? What are your expectations of me? And so asking the right questions like that can create an environment where they are able to share their perspective and maybe empathize with you or you empathize with them. So that would be one. Another would be try to expand their world. A lot of times people are operating because of the examples that have been modeled to them in a very small little world. They've never been to another ministry. They don't have an advisory group made up of other people. They just haven't, their world is small. And whenever you can expand their world, go to a conference, go to a boot camp, watch a live coaching, and expose them to different ideas, that leads to different conversations, different thinking, and then you can actually start making some agreements together, right? And then for people who are working on your team, that takes a lot of thought. As an example, one of the things that I remember dealing with a lot with younger team members was I would not tell them when to come to work, and I would not tell them when to leave if they were full-time. I told them that I expected that they would work in a healthy way, that they would be available to do the work when it needed to be done at different seasons, and that if they ever had questions about that, we could talk about that. And the younger they were, the more apt they were to say, I wish you would just tell me what time to come in and what time to leave. I'm like, I'm not going to tell you that because I am not evaluating you on that. I do not care if you're here at a certain time and leave at a certain time of day if the right things aren't getting done. I don't care if you showed up at this time and left at that time if your whole life is falling apart as well, right? That in no way does that structure promote something healthy. It's deeper than that, right? We have to talk about how we're doing. We have to talk about how we're responding to pressures. I had another team member who, when she got under pressure and overwhelmed, she'd just get quiet. So she wouldn't tell anybody that she was overwhelmed. She wouldn't tell anybody that there was no way she could get done everything to be done. She would just be quiet and frustrated and anxious, and then drop balls all over the place. And so you'd figure out she was overwhelmed because of all the bleeding projects that were left everywhere. And so it took time. It took a couple of years even to build up trust with her to say, it's okay to say, I really don't know what my priorities are. Can you help me think those priorities through? So those are three kind of angles. How do I lead up? How do I lead the people around me and then lead the people below me as well? Rusty says the need to withdraw to re-energize, not being selfish, but is necessary to serve better and more effectively. That's exactly right. Truett, Kathy, and then his son Dan, Kathy, they love to use the oxygen mask example on an airplane. The message is always, if the oxygen pressure, cabin pressure fails, the oxygen mask falls, put the mask on yourself first, then assist the child next to you. And so many of these rhythms are oxygen in our lives with leaders. And again, we see that example lived out so fully in the life of Christ if we learn to look at it that way. Miranda, gosh, these are some good questions. How do you make time for visits when there doesn't ever seem to be enough time to accomplish the office work? Okay, great question. That is a very humble question to ask. There will never, ever be enough time to accomplish office work. There is never enough time to accomplish all that you have in your mind to accomplish. If you are capable, if you're a solid thinker, if you've measured well, counted the cost well of the work, what you will find is there will never be enough time to do all of that. We all have as little or as much time as everyone else. And so what you're asking there about is, how in the world do I make decisions in keeping with the priorities? That's the issue. It's extremely easy for most leaders to articulate their priorities. Some even have them written down. The hard part is day to day, this person comes in my office, this email comes in, this phone call comes in. How do I make decisions moment by moment that reflect those priorities? And number one, Miranda, you're not going to do that perfectly. No one does. But if you keep doing it better, you will be astonished at what you accomplish. So making time for visits has to be first, because the office work is always, you're always going to have that stuff coming at you. But most people aren't going to, donors in particular, they're not going to be constantly reaching out to you wanting to meet with you. You have to be reaching out to them. I don't know that I've ever met a leader who said, I have too many donors calling me all the time to try to get a meeting with me. I can't even respond to it all. That never happens. It's always the question you're asking. And so trusting yourself a little bit more to say, you know what, I know how to get the right things done. And so I can commit the time, I can make the time available on my calendar for a face-to-face meeting, schedule that, and know that unless it's a true somebody's broken, something's bleeding emergency, that things are going to be okay. The reason why that always holds true is because we're human. None of us are operating at the level of perfection. You're not spending every waking working hour at your highest level of output on all that office work. You're not. So what you are doing is putting a lot of energy and time in things that may be a lesser priority than you deep down have sensed. So that is the challenge, Miranda. And I think that's a huge leadership journey or aspect of leadership journey. Holt Hall says, I spend this time to contact new parents, to meet with them, to build a relationship. No ask is a part of this, but sets up good relationships for next year. Your thoughts? You mean this time of year, Holt, that's what you're doing? No, I think that's excellent. I really do. Again, I would say if that's the primary development work that you're doing, I'd probably challenge you to get multiple plates spinning at once. So the reality is that there are people who gave last year and gave even prior to that, who've normally given in the January to June or July season, that 6-month chunk of time. So it's critical that above everything else, that those people are being reported to and thanked and being positioned for an ask in April, May. I mean, there's obviously flexibility there, but just start looking in terms of the course of the year, because retaining is most important, regaining second most important, new donor recruiting, which is where new parents would fall, third most important. So you have to keep those plates spinning. But in terms of a time of year to focus on new families, absolutely. Fantastic new time of year, because if you don't have them engaged in their first 2 years in giving, statistically speaking, it becomes very, very difficult, if not impossible, to see them start giving later. So you're wise to have that on your plate. So as long as it's not the only thing on your plate for development, I think you'll, I'm glad you're doing that. So, okay. Man, I love it when the questions come in. It keeps me hopping. I think that's it. And it's 12:59. So if you have a question that you were afraid to ask or didn't get to ask, please email me. I will definitely respond and give you my best. We will follow up with the recording of this and the slides as usual. Let me know if you can come to the boot camp. Would love to have you there. And I'll look forward to next month, our next live coaching. Hope you can join us then. So thank you again for this time, and y'all have a blessed day.